3 decades ago, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers captured my imagination. Like many of my fellow 90s kids, I watched after school, joined the official fan club, and of course, collected the toys. Eventually, I put those toys away, but the flame of my Power Rangers fandom never died. Now, in this milestone 30th anniversary year, I am re-examining the show, its legacy, and the tale of its most legendary ranger across media. It's time to get back to action. Welcome to Summoning the Zords, a Power Rangers fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss 1995's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie is returning guest, comic book artist V Ken Marion. Welcome back.
Hey, Flat Squirrel Productions Zone Green Ranger, right? Yeah! Thanks for having me back, man.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to have you here again. Look, I am always excited for all of these episodes. I wouldn't do them if I weren't, but this one is special because I think if you were a kid in the 90s and you were a fan of Power Rangers, this movie was an indelible part of the entire experience. So it's a big special thing to be here talking about it now.
Dude, it's wild. I mean, it's wild. Going back this week and watching it for the prep for the show, it made me think, because before we even dive into the movie, I want to talk about just the life, our lives leading up to it, right? But I was convinced that this and Batman Returns came out at different years because I remember so hard in my mind the McDonald's campaigns for both these movies, but apparently they were a month apart, which is crazy. It just goes to show when we were kids how a month felt like an eternity,
Wait, Batman Returns?
Sorry, not Batman Returns. Batman Forever. Sorry, Batman Forever. Messed up. The one with Jim Carrey. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I know. It was really such an experience. There's a lot to unpack here. So just by way of setup, again, we're talking about this 1995 film directed by Brian Spicer that featured the core cast from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers television show. Again, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, I don't need to explain any of this, but just in case. What was so fascinating about this, we've been talking about it on the podcast, right? And Power Rangers fans are well aware that for the television show, right, it was this mix of original American footage and footage from the Japanese series. We've talked about this a lot. One of the things that was so distinct about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie is that it was a wholly original production. So there was no interspersing Japanese footage here. Everything that was created for the movie. And so we got new costumes, new sets. We got CGI Zords, and it existed in sort of its own pocket of continuity. So eventually, actually very shortly after the movie, the Rangers would get ninja powers on the show, but they had a whole arc, which we'll talk about in our next episode, that was devoted to showing how they got ninja powers on the show. So it was not like the TV show followed what the movie had done. It was really its own thing, but again, very much felt like an outgrowth of the show. And it was just this, I think, very interesting, unique hybrid, right, between a continuation and its own thing. And it just occupies a very singular space, I feel, within the franchise. And it was so much fun to go back and rewatch.
I will say as a kid, my memories of it were I just thought it was the same thing. I had no concept of continuity and love different timelines or whatever. And when the show came back and they had the ninja costumes in my head, it was just from the movie. Because you didn't really if you missed the airing, you missed it. It wasn't there was a database or Wikipedia to look up the story. So I feel even though you're right, it was kind of its own little thing. I just found that out listening to your show this year. So it's one of those things where growing up as a kid, I thought it was, just part of the show. So,
and I wish that I could remember what I thought about this at the time. I just don't. I certainly remember watching the movie, and we'll talk about it. And then I definitely watched that Ninja Quest arc at the beginning of season 3 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but I couldn't tell you if I had any sort of conception of, oh, they're getting the ninja powers, but it's through different means. There's Ninjor, they're doing their own spin on it versus what I had just seen on the movie. I don't know. I definitely would not have been able to articulate, oh, it's a separate continuity. Like that would not have been part of the equation. So I don't know what I really thought. And obviously the end result is the same, right? They have the ninja powers, they have the ninja Zords.
Well, you know what I might have thought were the ninja Zords on the show different from the ones in the movie? Like, were they different animals and stuff? Do you remember?
So I'll be able to answer this next time in 2 weeks when we do our Ninja Quest episode. And I'm sure people listening know, I think they were the same. I'm not 100% sure. I think the animals were the same, but I'm not positive. I'll know next time.
I may have in my head just taken again, I don't really have any memory of this for sure, but I'm going to assume that as a kid, I just took it as this was like an adventure the Power Rangers went on, and then when they went back to the TV show, it was just another, like, it was probably to me like one linear kind of thing. Like I also didn't really care about the continuity of stories as a kid. I was just like, oh well, now they've got this power, cool. Now they got this power, cool. You know what I mean? Like I was watching Power Rangers for the very surface level of watching them fight. Like that's pretty much it. So yeah.
No, I totally understand, and I think it totally works in that way. And what I keep coming back to, especially now as I'm revisiting all of this stuff for this podcast and its 30th anniversary year of Power Rangers, it's just so wild to me that this is the version we got. And I'm so happy that we did, because again, it's its own special thing. But, if they had done a Power Rangers movie, even at that time, that was just completely separate, right? Maybe even different characters, at least different actors. If it was just totally separate, I would have understood that. If they had done something like they would later do with Turbo, where, and in full disclosure, I have still not seen the Power Rangers Turbo movie. I've watched the trailer and stuff, and I've watched clips. We'll do an episode on that later, so I will immerse myself in the Turbo era. But from what I understand, that felt like and looked like kind of like a long episode of the Power Rangers TV show. This, again, in terms of the aesthetic and just the vibe of it, was really its own thing, but again, still utilized our core cast and makeup of Rangers and didn't contradict the continuity of the show, essentially. So It was this very weird blend. And again, I think if something like this were to happen now, I don't know that you would get something quite like this. But I'm glad that we got it. I can't stress this enough, but it's just so wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things about this movie that are super interesting. I will disagree with you that I do think this movie does feel like an episode of the show. It doesn't look like it but I feel like it very much just feels like a long episode. Like it's there's not much story here. It's like it's just them like fighting and kicking ass and but honestly, as a kid, that's all I wanted. I mean, I was watching it this week and not gonna lie, it was a little rough watch as an adult trying to get through it, but when the fight scene started, it was reminded this is totally why I loved this as a kid. Because I brought this up on, I think, in the first episode I did with you, but this movie is another good example of it, where this show felt watching it again, it felt like a Jackie Chan or Jet Li or a Van Damme movie for kids. It literally was they were doing the fights themselves, very little special effects, and the fights were really good. They were well choreographed. They were visceral. They were super high energy. You compare it to Batman Forever or The Shadow or The Phantom or the Superman movies or any of the other superhero movies coming out at the time, the fight scenes in this blow it away. And it's not even close, So I understand why Power Rangers just hooked us as a generation so hard. It was a very it was like our 9-year-old selves version of Van Damme movies. It was cool.
No, it's true. And look, you and I talked about this in the first episode, and this has come up a number of times, but one of the things that as an adult I really appreciate way more than I did as a kid. I think as a kid it was more subliminal, but now I'm more dialed into it. But just seeing them in action like that, and one of the things that I was struck by, and that's the thing. One of the things that I was really struck by in watching the movie again was how few masked / morphed fights there were. There are a couple, but that initial fight against Ooze's monsters, they're unmorphed for a significant portion of it. And then once they get their ninja garb, there are the two phases, right? There's the first phase where you see their faces and then they sort of power up and then the hoods come on. And so, there's maybe a little bit more of a cheat there. But for so much of this movie, really big big set pieces. You're seeing the kids, the kids.
I wonder if it's actually them in the suits for the movie. I mean, I'm sure there were stunt doubles, but like they clearly know the how to fight, like do the martial arts. So like, I wonder how much of it was actually them. Like, I'm sure Jason David Frank did most of his, you know?
Okay, so on that front, now when they're in their ninja garb, that's one thing, but when the Rangers are morphed, my understanding is, except when the helmets are off, obviously, I think it's almost exclusively the stunt actors at that point.
Gotcha.
So on the Blu-ray, there is it's like a 40-minute retrospective. It's a really cool special feature. It's also available. Someone posted it on YouTube as well, and I had actually texted you about this as well. So the director, Brian Spicer, his whole thing when he came into this was he wanted to be able to see the actors' faces when they're morphed as the Rangers, to see them emote. And so the stunt team, filmed test footage where you actually saw them without the visors and the helmet and all of that, and it just didn't quite work. And in that retrospective, they also talked about how the stunt people were the ones who knew all of those. And of course, for people who are watching on YouTube, you can see me doing this. For those who are listening, you can't. But like all the arm and leg gestures and everything, like all the poses that they get into, the stunt team knew that. It wasn't necessarily the regular actors. So based on what they were saying in that retrospective and just kind of our understanding of how this franchise operated, and please, audience, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that when they were morphed and they had their helmets on, certainly they were providing the voiceover, but that was not the actual actors in the suits.
Gotcha.
And apparently they were very heavy. That was one of the other things that they talked about. They were, I think the number they said in that special, it was like 20 pounds. And then I was reading online, it was even heavier. So those were very heavy, those movie costumes.
They looked good, man. And that was one of the things I was thinking. I was like, these look better than like a lot of the superhero costumes today. Like, I was actually, because they're flexible, you know what I mean? Like, they could actually, like you're saying they're heavy, but like they're actually flexible. Like, they could actually do all the moves. And like I don't know, you compare that to like, I mean, it's apples and oranges, right? But like, if you think about like the first Christian Bale Batman suit, right? Like, obviously they're different aesthetics and stuff, but like, if you think about like the practicality of the two costumes, like I feel like the Power Rangers ones, like, I don't know, man, for what they were, for like the aesthetic they were going for, I think they looked really good, you know?
So I want to circle back to that, and especially your perspective as an artist. I want to pick that apart a little bit more, but let's take a step back and kind of go back to what you were saying before. So just I know we're talking about the specifics of the movie, but just the feeling, the emotion of this, like, what do you remember about this time when you were a kid and you knew there was a Power Rangers movie coming out? Just like take me back to that time.
Okay, I remember the first moment I heard about it. Okay, so this is crazy. I don't actually think I saw this movie in the theaters because oh man, we have a whole nother story because we're gonna talk about the McDonald's tie into this. So that's like, I don't think I actually saw this movie until it came on home video. But I do remember how I even found out they were making this movie. It was on Thanksgiving. I was at my grandma's house. It was Black Friday. In the newspaper was an ad for this movie that came out that weekend called The Page Master, which I'm not sure if you remember this movie, but it was like Macaulay Culkin was like a kid who gets sucked into a book and he turns into a cartoon. And like, so half the movie's live action, half it's cartoon. Do you remember that? So
I have not thought about this in probably 25 years, but as you say it, yes, I remember this movie.
Wow.
Specifically. Okay. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Do you remember it in reference to the Power Rangers? Do you have a connection with Power Rangers from this? Okay.
I don't.
So my parents were sitting at this was, God, I was in first grade. I think I was in first grade. So I was like 7, I think. And we're sitting at my grandparents' kitchen table. It's Black Friday morning. My dad's reading the paper. And he sees an ad in the paper for, I want to say it's Thanksgiving. This, maybe I'm getting the dates messed up, but this for certain was that there was an ad in the paper for come see the Page Master and you get an exclusive Power Rangers, the movie poster. And I was like, wait, what? Like, my dad's like, there's going to be a Power Rangers movie and we can get a poster. And so I never went to the movie theater as a kid. I went maybe like twice a year just because like it was like a timing thing and it was expensive and all that. But for some reason, my dad and mom, like, they both had off because it was like, I want to say it was Thanksgiving, and they were like, let's go see it and get you the poster, right? And I had that poster on my wall, dude, for like forever, like way long, like probably up until like like 7th or 8th grade. Like it wasn't like I wanted on there, but it was just like I just never took it off kind of thing. It was on the back. It was on the back of my door, and it was like it was like a cartoon drawing of like their heads stacked from the profile. Do you remember this poster? It was like
Very
them
much.
sideways and their heads were stacked, and I was like, whoa! And my mind was like blown. I was like, there's gonna be a Power Rangers movie. Holy crap! Like I was so excited about it. And then after that, it was a Scholastic book fair, I think in the spring, had like the novelization of the movie. And so I read that. And most movies actually I read the novelizations of because I didn't really go to the theater that much. So I read the novelization of that, and the pictures in the book was like my kind of like link to the movie for like the longest time until I saw it on home video. What about you? What's your story?
Oh, that's so cool. I wish I had a better story. What's crazy is that I have at best a vague memory of seeing it in the theater. You would think that this would be seared into my brain, but it's just not for whatever reason. And I was talking about this to my mom recently, and I was like, "Do you remember taking me to the theater?" And she was like, "No, but I'm sure we did." So my memory of seeing it in the theater again is minimal. What I actually do remember is that my my dad brought home a bootleg copy of it, and I can't think of any other instance where that happened. But I guess that they knew, my parents knew how into this I was, and this was, I can still remember watching that VHS, and it was old school bootleg thing where, it was just a guy in the theater with the video camera, and, you see people, getting up and
Wow.
walking across the screen and all that. But so it's like weirdly, that's what I remember, I think, more than the theater experience is that, and here's the thing, again, this is 95. So I'm 8. It's like, I didn't even know what a bootleg copy was, right? Like my dad brought it home and he's like, here's a Power Rangers movie on
Yeah.
VHS. And I'm watching it, and I mean, I must have realized that this didn't look the way other movies on home video looked, but there wasn't even any sort of calculus of like, oh, this is a bootleg copy and that and anything like that. It was just like, oh, I got to watch it at home. But yeah, I mean, it was just, I guess more than anything, even more than that, it's just the excitement and the toys. And I know we were texting about this earlier today, those McDonald's toys. I'll toss it to you in a second, but I watched the thing that you sent me, but then I also watched just one of the vintage McDonald's commercials from the
Oh, I
time.
didn't see that. Okay.
And it was so, and I had all of those toys and I remember getting them. And it's funny.
Did you have all of them?
Yes,
Because I had all of them. Yeah.
for
Nice.
sure. And I remember the commercial was funny because the commercial itself was geared towards the parents, and it said, you get a break and your kids, your kids get the Power Rangers action. And now as a parent, I can definitely appreciate that part of the commercial. It's like, yeah, that's true. If you find something that your kid will be occupied with for a few minutes, that's gold.
That's so funny, dude. So my memory, so skip into like the fact that I didn't see it in theaters. I think it was, so I think one of the reasons I didn't see a lot of theaters, a lot of movies in the summer was because my dad traveled a lot in the summer. He was a traveling salesman. So in the summer, every year, like every year up until I was like a teenager, pretty much, we would basically, it would double as like family vacations. Like, so like if he had to go to Florida, like make like a round to visit his like customers in Florida, like we would basically go with him for like 2 weeks, on like a road trip, and then Canada for like another 2 weeks. So it was like our summer vacations were kind of like with my dad, like going on road trips. So and we never went to movies during that. So like I feel like it came out during one of those times, but that's when the McDonald's like campaign was going. And I remember so distinctly like every meal on those road trips being like, let's go to McDonald's and get the Power Rangers. And like my parents were game. Like they were like, I mean, I'm sure my dad wishes like health wise he didn't do it now, but like it's like, but yeah, I got all 6 of the Power Rangers, and like those figures were so cool because to my knowledge, at least, they were the only ones made that actually looked like the Power Rangers in the movie. Like the ones you bought in the stores were like basically just the regular Power Rangers figures, but shiny. Do you remember that?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because at first I
Like,
thought you were going to say like they didn't do any movie toys, and I was like, no, they like I remember seeing those, but I think you're right. I think they were just, and again, audience, correct me if I'm
yeah,
wrong. We'll do an episode down the line where we
I could
talk
be
about
totally
the
wrong
toys
about this, but yeah.
more specifically, but I don't think you're off here. I think they were just shinier versions. Again, I
That
could
was
be
my
off on
memory.
this.
Yeah, my memory was that like the real quote unquote toys were like they basically took the normal toys and gave them like a metallic like color. So like the Red Ranger was metallic red instead of flat red, right? but like the ones for the McDonald's toys were actually like sculpted to look like the movie costumes, like with the ribbing on the elbows and the feet and stuff. So I just thought that was so cool as a kid. And they were like the only time like a McDonald's toy from my memory was actually like a good toy. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like just like a crappy like wind up thing or something, you know?
I mean, when it comes to McDonald's toys, I mean, as a kid, I would get them all the time, but the two lines that I actually remember are the Power Rangers and the Batman Returns. Those are the ones
Yeah.
that I have vivid memories of.
Do you remember the Hook toys? Because those were pretty cool too. I had those.
Maybe if I saw them, I can't picture them though.
Yeah. They were cool.
Yeah.
Okay, the side tangent, side tangent. God, I
No,
haven't
but
thought
those,
about this in like years. Like
I know they were. I mean, do you still have them?
they're in my parents' attic somewhere. But yeah, I mean, they should be. If they're not like a melted ball of plastic from the summer heat in the attic, you know, they should be in there somewhere.
But you have. That's the thing. And I've talked about this before, but there came a point where I just felt like, okay, I need to divest myself of all this stuff. What do I need to hang on to these action figures for? And so, whether it was Power Rangers or just my, DC or Marvel figures, I parted with everything really through yard sales and bringing them to my local comic shop. That
Oh
was it. And
wow. Yeah.
and at the time it made sense. I never thought that I would be doing these podcasts where I would where I would like want to be able to look at them and talk about them and everything. But I wish, and it's one of these things. It's like, all these action figures, I'm sure, you put them in a couple of boxes. It's like, it wouldn't have taken up that much space.
Yeah.
I do wish I had kept them. Those in particular. That's the thing. Or I know I've said this before too. At a minimum, I wish I just took photos of this stuff before I sold it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
at the same time, we didn't have cell phones with cameras at the time, so it would have been a more involved process. But it's like, I'm kicking myself. It's like, at a minimum, it's like, even if you're going to sell it, that's fine. Just take some photos so you could see exactly what you had, and at least have
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
something to conjure your memories.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I always tell my parents like I'm like I want to one day, one summer, just for like a like a week, go through the attic and dig out all my old crap and like see what I've got and put stuff on eBay. And I'm like, but then like I know what's gonna happen. I'm not gonna want to sell anything, and then it's just gonna make a mess, and then I'm gonna have to put it back in the attic, like.
but
So
honestly, not to tell you what to do, but it's like, even if you just took some photos, like just take them out of the boxes, line them up, take photos, then throw them right back. But at least then you have the photos, you can look at them, and you'll kind of take stock of what you have. But I remember all of that. I definitely had those McDonald's toys. I definitely had whatever figures they put out from the movie, those shiny metallic ones. I know I had those. I remember the Ooze. Did
I
you
didn't
have
have
the
any of
Ooze?
the ooze. I did not have any of the ooze. No.
So that's, of course, the other big piece of this movie, that we get an original
Yeah.
villain, Ivan Ooze, and they put out that slime-like substance, the purple ooze. And I definitely
Yeah.
remember that. I remember the smell. And I particularly remember it because my son has a toy now that smells just like it. It's not a particularly pleasant
Is
odor.
it gack?
It's kind of like that, essentially. It's
Yeah.
kind of like that. But I was smelling that recently. I was like, oh, like that's that. Yeah, that's what that was. Because I definitely had the ooze as well.
Dude, how weird was the '90s? There was gack, there was Floam, there was all this like Nickelodeon like toys that were like different versions of putty essentially that like you just like throw on the wall. Like that must have drove our parents crazy. Like,
Yeah, no, I know.
do you remember Floam? Do you remember Floam? It was like moldable foam. It was like wet foam that you like could mash around. We would like put it into discs and throw it up into the ceiling fan and have it like cut it in half. It was like it drove my parents crazy. Yeah.
No, that I don't remember specifically, but certainly the gack. Like I definitely remember that. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, this takes me right back. I have to say, in rewatching this movie, and I know you said before it was a little rough rewatching it. So on my other podcast, one of my other podcasts, My Comic Shop History, I did an episode on this movie a few years ago now. And I think when I watched it that time, I probably had a similar experience as you did, where, I was seeing more of the maybe like the faults or the limitations or whatever. This time, for whatever reason, I think maybe because I've been spending so much time rewatching the regular episodes, but man, I was all in on this movie. I was like, and again, it took me back to that time, but I was just like, this was so fun. And it just left you with such a great feeling. It's like they get these ninja outfits, they get new powers, they get new Zords. They kick Ivan Ooze in the balls. They send him into that comet. They perform a resurrection. They're chowing down at Ernie's. Fireworks are going. Van Halen is playing.
Van Halen's
This is
playing at the end.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. It leaves, it does, this movie does have even now, like at my older age, it definitely has moments that like it is specifically designed to pump you up. You know what I mean? Like the ending with Dream, Van Halen's Dreams plays at the end. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. And like the beginning with the skydiving, like that is literally meant, that whole sequence is makes no sense in the plot of the movie. It's just there to get your adrenaline like pumping to be like, this movie's gonna rock. You know what I mean? Like that's like literally what it's there for, you know? So it's yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it definitely had some of those moments for sure watching it.
And, you know, going back to what you were saying before, I get what you're saying where, you know, you said it felt like a longer episode of the show. I don't, I mean, I don't entirely disagree. Do you know what I think made the biggest difference for me though? And this is, from the time I was a kid to now, the Zordon of it all. The fact that we see Zordon out of his tube and he's dying, you know,
It's
this,
weird.
I guess it was weird. It was weird to see him like that, but I think it was just the stakes. The stakes just felt so much higher than they did in the show. And even as you're watching the movie, it's like, of course, you know, it'll be okay. But it was you know, they took it up a notch from the show. And I think maybe when I say it didn't feel like the show, I think a lot of it hinges on that, where it's just like
Okay, I
Zordon's
can
out of
see
his
that.
tube, like he's dying. Like the show would not do this. So I think
Yeah.
that was a big part of why it just felt so different.
Yeah. No, I could see that. I could see that for sure. Um, Speaking about differences from the show, something that I noticed in this movie that I never clocked as a kid, and there's a couple things I want to talk about that I didn't notice as a kid, but the big one is I did not realize as a kid how much the Red Ranger was totally sidelined in this movie. Like he might as well like not even be in the movie. It's very weird if you look at the trajectory of Power Rangers, how the Red Ranger is the leader in the beginning of it, right? And in the Japanese version, he's straight up. It's like basically about him. He's like the main character, right? And if you watch these shows, like they bring Tommy in, he's like this cool side character, and it's weird. He like basically usurps being the main character like halfway through, and to the point when they make this movie, and the Red Ranger like is like. I think he's like like his Zord is one of the arms, you know. It's not even like the main like thing, you know, of the Zord. Like it's very very weird how they just sideline him. And I did notice like watching this too is how much I wish it was the original three members. It was like Jason, Zach, and Trini instead of the replacement characters, because like they're the iconic ones to me. Even though I know they probably did it less time, but like they're the ones that like just like are like anchored in like my memories of being those characters, you know.
That was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I was thinking about this too. In our last episode, which just came out as of the time you and I are recording, is on the power transfer and the introduction of Rocky, Adam, and Aisha into the show. And I was thinking about this because you know, I've been thinking about this movie for so long, and it was a big part of my childhood, and rewatching it now. And it's like, you know, Rocky, Adam, and Aisha in the movie, it's just such a part of the film. But yes, at the same time, taking a step back, not unlike yourself, there is a part of me that's like, oh man, it would have been so cool if the original group
Yeah.
had this movie moment.
Well, did you notice in the movie that like Billy was way cooler than he was in the show? Like he
Yeah.
wasn't like the bumbling idiot, and like most of what the Power Rangers did centered on Tommy, Kimberly, and Billy. Did you notice that? Like the other three, I mean, yeah, they did some stuff, but they were really pushed in the back. Like, and I noticed that it was very apparent to me watching it now is that those three newer ones, they really like gave them very little to do, and like the most was Tommy, then it was Kimberly, and then Billy, and then the other three were just kind of like afterthoughts. Just very strange, you know.
So in that retrospective, Karen Ashley talked about how when she and Johnny Young Bosch and Steve Cardenas were hired, it was very, everything came together quickly, and it was like, okay, you're going to shoot the show for a few months, and then you're going to go off to do the movie. So I think the timeline was so compressed that, you know, it wasn't like, oh, they had been part of the show for such a long time and they've got their own thing going. So if they did lean more on the other characters, I think that probably tracks with the whole timing of it.
Interesting.
But
Interesting.
that's a fair point. And look, with the Red Ranger, this was something that we talked about when we did the power transfer, which was, it would have been really like, I do wonder what the dynamic would have been like if Austin St. John and the others, but especially Austin St. John, if he hadn't left the show. Because when you watch White Light, right, and Tommy is reintroduced as the White Ranger, the line that Zordon says of welcome, you know, this is the new leader of the Power Rangers, that was added after the fact when they knew that Austin St. John was leaving. So this whole bit about now Tommy's the leader, that was just tacked on after the fact when they knew they weren't going to have Austin St. John.
Wait. So in the show, Zordon says the new leader is the White Ranger.
Yeah, in White Light
Okay.
Part 2, when Tommy's brought back.
And in the show, is that after Rocky's introduced, or is Jason still around?
Jason's still there. So White Light, to me, and not to rehash the last episode, but that to me really felt like the last hurrah of the OG era, because it's and this was crazy. I had totally forgotten this until I was rewatching, but it's like 2 episodes before we get into that business where you don't see Jason, Zach, or Trini, right? They're always morphed, or there's always recycled footage. It's such a shockingly fleeting period of time where Tommy is the White Ranger and Jason is still there. It's like 2 episodes. And then there's a few more episodes where officially Jason is still there, but Austin St. John is gone.
Okay.
So like, that's the thing. And I wonder what the vibe would have been. Would it have been more like it was when Tommy was the Green Ranger, where he's the 6th Ranger, as opposed to the team is centered around him?
This might be a hot take, but I like him way better as the Green Ranger. I think he's so much cooler as like the bad boy dude who like helps him out once in a while and is like the extra like guy on the side. Like, I think he's like way cooler in that role than as the White Ranger and I also think like the White Ranger is from a different show, from a different Japanese show that they cut into the Power Rangers. So like his aesthetic visually doesn't match with the other ones. Like, and that's something I do want to talk about that weird whole thing about the the aesthetics and, you know, changing Zords and everything.
Yeah, we go for it.
Oh, no, yeah, okay, so when he got introduced in the show, the White Ranger, that's when they changed the Zords again too, right? They went from being like the regular ones that we all remember, like Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, all that, to like being like the lion and the dragon and everything.
So that had happened at the beginning of season 2 when they introduced Lord Zed. That's when they got their Zord upgrade to the Thunder Zords. And at that time, when all the other Rangers got their Zords, Tommy didn't. He was still with the Dragon Zord, and this was the time where his powers were fading and all of that.
Oh, okay. So that happens before the White Ranger shows up.
Yes. Okay.
So my understanding, because I was looking this up, because I bought the Japanese version of the Power Rangers, the original one, the show that Mighty Morphin was cut from, and the White Ranger's not in it. So I was like looking up, like, where did he come from? So apparently, internet, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but I think this is what it is. The White Ranger is from the same show as those Zords, I think.
Okay.
And those Zords, the footage of those Zords, like if you look at what they look like, the other Color Rangers look way different. Like they don't look, they're like, and so that's why his visual aesthetic doesn't match them. That's why he doesn't have the diamonds on him and stuff, and his belt's different and everything. And so that made me thinking now, watching the show when they get their new Zords here, was like, they keep changing their Zords, but their costumes are still based off the original Zords. And I never put that together as a kid. It hit me in this one when Rocky jumps into the gorilla thing, and I'm like, wait, he still has the Tyrannosaurus on his head. And I'm like, wait, but did he have a dragon Zord too? Like, I'm like, huh, that's very strange. Like that they kept changing the Zords and like their animal, but they never changed their suit. You know, like I thought that was very interesting.
No, it's super interesting. I think it really points to this commitment that Saban had initially, right, to keep that consistency, right? And eventually they would get to the point where, right, every season we're getting the changing of actors and characters and costumes and Zords and all of that, really following the Japanese show. But yeah, for those first 3 seasons, it's like they bent over backwards, right, to keep as much of the same cast as they could, right, as people were coming and going, with keeping the cast and keeping them in those original costumes that people were familiar with. That's why, and we'll talk about this when we get to Zeo. That's coming up, and I'm very excited to get to the Zeo era. But that's why I think, that felt, I don't know how, your memories of this, but that felt huge to me when they switched to Zeo. No?
As a kid, I thought I thought they looked dumb. They had like shapes on their head instead of like animals, and I was like, I don't like that. That's kind of when I started like being like, I'm too old for Power Rangers. At the ripe old age of 8, I'm like, this is just kid stuff. I can't watch Power Rangers anymore. Like,
not to get ahead of the podcast here, but I've been saying on the show that I quit whatever, like halfway through Zeo, but I was looking at the list of episodes, and Jason's return as the Gold Ranger is pretty deep into the show. And I was reading episode descriptions. I think I might have quit like 10 episodes before the end. I mean, I watched almost all of ZO.
I did watch the Gold Ranger stuff. I do remember that.
It's deep. I mean, I forget the exact episode numbers, but it's pretty far in. So if you got to Jason, you saw a significant portion of ZO. But going back to the Mighty Morphin movie, you're right. And with Rocky in particular, you look at all of the Rangers. Obviously, Tommy's at the forefront. He's leading the charge. Kimberly has some stuff to do. The emotional piece, right? She's the most concerned about Zordon, right? She's the most emotional. She's the one who says, "You've been like a father to us." So there was a little meat on the bone there.
She
her.
pilots the Megazord before Tommy hooks onto it. She's like the main pilot of the Megazord, which I noticed because the Pink Ranger was the centerpiece of it. The Megazord looks god awful in this movie. It is so bad. Like I'm not even talking about the CGI. I'm just talking like the design of it looks horrible. Like it doesn't look cool at all. Like, it's just like big blocks. Like,
well. So, but anyway, just to button up the Red Ranger piece. Yeah, I mean, even Adam, the Black Ranger, he has this whole moment with the frog, which Johnny Young Bosch has talked about this in countless interviews. But that was his suggestion, right? He suggested to the director, like, what if Adam's not happy with being the frog when they're all being given their animal spirits, and so he has that moment. And just as a side note, one thing that came up in that retrospective, apparently the director was very collaborative and was open to the idea. Like they kind of all spoke about that he was, pretty open to their ideas and things like that, which is neat, nice to hear. But, so he at least had that moment. Yeah. I mean, I think, Rocky, and not unlike the show either, like, yeah, he's just kind of there, which, watching the show for the first season and a half, Red Ranger's front and center. And now, he's just kind of there.
It's very
a little
strange.
Tough. I know.
The thing I did clock that frog thing with the Black Ranger with Adam being like the frog. I'm like, I was kind of want to be like, dude, come on, you got the coolest color. You're the Black Ranger. Like, you're the who cares? You're the frog. You look the coolest in the ninja suit. Like,
but so as far as the Zord, so you and I were texting about the CGI. So now when we were texting, you said that you remembered loving it as a kid. So as now, what did you think?
Oh, dude, I remember being psyched about it as a kid, being like, oh my God, Tommy's got a Falcon. This is so cool. And it's going to be CGI. This is going to be awesome. Like, so cool. Yeah, watching it, I'm like, this looks so bad. I mean, the CGI is like not great. It looks kind of like Reboot. If anyone remembers that cartoon show Reboot, it looks or Beast Wars. It's very much on that level, dropped into like live action footage. So there's no sort of like uncanny valley going on at all. It's like, no, this is like really, really CGI in the middle of this. But aside from that, just the design of the Zord, the Megazord just does not look cool. It's just very blocky. The head is huge. It's like this oversized head. It's a big square. It's like, man, they messed that up.
I hear you. In fairness to them, right? It's easy for us to look at it in 2023. We've seen amazing things done with CGI, right? This was mid 90s. And, this movie, I think it was a $20 million budget, which is not, it sounds like a lot, but right, for a big movie, that's really not that much. So
I mean, for back then, that's pretty big. You think Batman had like 40, I think. So,
okay.
It's half. Like, it's not, yeah.
But I cut them some slack because it was so, the CGI was so primitive, right? And yeah, at the time, I probably thought it was cool.
Don't you wish they just had a guy in a costume?
Yes.
Don't you wish they did that? Yeah.
No, that's the thing. The one thing that I guess the other thing that makes me a little bit more forgiving, and I don't mean to keep circling back to this featurette on the Blu-ray, but it did illuminate a lot. And Spicer, the director, was talking about how they tried to utilize all of the kinds of effects that were at their disposal. So a lot of it is practical, and there's a ton of wire work, certainly when all the Rangers are doing their flips and all that stuff. But even when one of the things they highlighted was, remember when the Tengu warriors fly down in formation to the construction site before Ooze blasts them? That was all done with wire. Like, those stuntmen were up, suspended by wires via a crane. Like, they showed the behind the scenes footage. It's like, I mean, I know that's their job,
cool.
But that's like crazy. Like, they were up so high. So there was so much that was done practically. Oh, when the Rangers are in the jungle on the planet of Thedos, and they're trying to get the new power source, and those dinosaur skeletons are attacking them.
That looks practical.
Giant puppets.
Yeah, yeah, no, I noticed that watching it. I was like, this does not look like CGI. This looks like, I'm like, I wonder how they did this because it looks really good. Like,
Exactly. So giant puppets.
yeah,
So he was saying like they wanted to. So there's a lot of wire work. There's the puppets, and they wanted to try the CGI. And I in fairness, I guess, just like they redesigned the costumes, which again I want to circle back to, and they built new sets. I guess the feeling was it's like, okay, people are used to seeing the Zords one way, so we're going to use this new technology and show it in a different way. That out of all of the things, that to me was the biggest misstep, because you look at the kind of footage we were getting on the show, and it's like that would have been vastly
yeah,
preferable to what we got here. But I mean, it is what it is. But yes, I'm with you. It's like give me a guy in a suit in the Zord
yeah,
suit, and it'll be great.
yeah, yeah. Make a little model of a city that you can trample through. Yeah, yeah.
They did make so that city was a miniature. They did talk about that. So that was like the
Really?
and then they filmed that and whatever they, I don't know exactly how the process would work for this, but they created this miniature and then they took the footage that they needed to, and then and I guess they
Interesting.
had the camera moving through it the way that they knew they wanted the camera to move, and then the CGI went in. But
No, I mean, like for what this movie is, which is like a kids movie for like based off this kids show, like it's really well done. Like it is a very well done movie for being a Power Rangers movie. You know, it's and like there is something about watching it, especially trying to like think back to when I was a kid, that like I like that the Power Rangers, they're not burdened with like, it's not like, well, this is the story of how Tommy like lost his parents and how he's like really like on this quest for vengeance against these monsters that like destroyed his soul. And like, it's like I like that it's like, nah, they're just these, they're these good people who just like they have their friends and they don't care why. They're great at karate, don't care why. They've got these powers, don't care why, and they kick ass. It's like there's something very simple about that concept that I think can get lost a lot in these modern superhero movies, that they which on one hand, like I said, going back, this was a little bit of a rough watch because of it being so simple, right? But then on the other hand, it's like, it was meant for like us when we were like kids, though. So I don't know.
so that's an interesting piece of all of this, and I don't disagree with you. I think they like the way they were able to strike this balance is actually pretty incredible in this movie, because again, I think clearly it worked, right? For those of us who had been watching the show, we have a
Mhm.
lot of love for this movie, especially based on our memories of watching it as a kid. So it definitely felt like an extension of the show. Yet, I guess circling back to what I was saying before, the stakes did feel higher. So I think they struck a nice balance of, again, it still felt like the show. It
Mhm.
wasn't like we were dealing with all of these issues that we're so beyond what
Yeah.
the show is built for, but it was raised to another degree. So I think they struck a good balance. But that was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you. Uh, this quest that they go on, right? So Ivan Ooze, he's unearthed by this construction crew, and Zed and Rita, intervene and all of that, and he's loose, and he's enacting his plan to brainwash and subjugate the parents of Angel Grove and then the world, and he's having them, dig out his what do they call the ectomorphicons? Is that what it is?
It's a very very weak plot. It is borderline terrible. Like
But
it's
but but
it's not a good story.
but he tears apart the command center, which we'll circle back to. But that forces the Rangers to need to find a new power source to once again
Mm.
become the Rangers and also to save Zordon. And so Alpha's able to use the remaining energy to teleport them to this other world, Australia,
Mhm.
and find this new source. And so, they fight the Tengu warriors there. They encounter Dulcia, the warrior protector of Thedos. They have this whole sequence at the temple where they're imbued with the energy of their animal spirits. Then they go off on their own into the jungle, and they have this gauntlet that they have to pass. First, fighting those dinosaur skeletons, and then those guardian sentinels of the monolith. And of course, they
Mhm.
make it through everything, and their powers are restored better than ever, and they teleport back to Earth. Uh, it's been equated to a Wizard of Oz esque, journey that they go on to this other world and all that. Did you? I mean, as
Generous.
you're laughing, yeah, I think maybe I have my answer. But did you feel that the quest that they go on was
So so
was
let,
enough?
I know I've been kind of knocking it here. I will say that the plot, the macro plot, is actually a pretty good story. Like if like what you just described is like the skeleton of like what could be a very interesting, cool story. The execution of it was like, how do I put this? Like, it felt like the kind of thing me and my friends would have made up when we were on the playground, like making up stories. You know what I mean? Like, and but I think that's why it was successful though. So like, why I'm knocking on it for being so simplistic and so like, no, things just happen. We lost our power. What's your power? It doesn't matter. It's our power. We need to get the new power. Well, what's the new power? It doesn't matter. It's just power. You know what I mean? Like, and like that, like again, like as someone who works in like comics and storytelling and like that, it's like the macro plot of them like needing to like being stripped of their powers and having to go get a better like that's all like actually a really good story, but like the execution of it is very simple, very like, young, you know what I mean? It's like, but like that was who the target demographic was. They weren't making this movie for us now, they were making it for us in 1995 when we were like 7, so like I think its biggest weakness is also its biggest strength, in the sense that like its simplicity is what made Power Rangers so popular.
You hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly it. So when you watch it, action wise, I think they give you a good amount of set pieces, especially during the quest portion, right? There's the fight with the Tengu Warriors, the fight with the dinosaur skeletons, and the fight with the Sentinels.
Yeah, and the ninja costumes looked awesome. Like the ninja costumes were so cool. Yeah.
But I think it's the sort of thing where this whole quest is largely plot driven. They need to get new powers, and then there are physical obstacles along their way. Now, going back to the example you said before, maybe if there's nothing really character driven in this. I think the most that we get is Kimberly being worried about Zordon, right? And that's hanging over everything. So that puts some meat on the bone here. But at the same time, there's nothing really character centric that's driving any of this. And I think probably for us as adults watching it, it's like, yeah, there's, that's maybe a little piece of it that's missing. It's just like you said, we got to get the power. Yeah. We'll fight these things. We'll get the power. And it's like, okay. And but for a young audience, it works.
Well, I mean, even there's that character, that kid and his dad, and it's like there's no explanation of like who this kid is. His like at the very end of the movie, it's like, oh, Tommy, yeah, you're my sensei. And it's like, wait, what? Like this kid, what? Like I was so like, what?
I know. So that is so funny because right at the beginning of the movie, the Rangers, they're all skydiving, and as part of this benefit to save the observatory, right, Angel Grove,
which never comes into play again. This observatory thing.
The observatory, no, but the fact that they're waiting for the comet that's going to pass, obviously that allows them to defeat Ooze at the end.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah.
So at least they give us that.
But like, so this is like the skydive. Let's go to the skydiving sequence for a second. As a kid, I thought there was nothing cooler than seeing Tommy like surfing with like a snowboard in the sky surfing. Watching it now, I'm like, why does he have a snowboard on his, like, this makes no sense. Like, he's not riding anything. He's literally just jumping out of a plane, but he's got a surfboard on his feet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was so perplexed watching it now. I'm like, is this something that people do now or did back in the 90s? Like, I don't get, I still don't get it. Like, I feel like if anything, that would make it harder to skydive now. Like, it's like,
I am not at all well versed enough to be able to give an answer, but I did have the same thought. But what's funny too? I think in my memory, I thought that the skydiving thing went on even longer than it does. It's an extended sequence, but it didn't last quite as long as I thought. But then we go right from that into the rollerblading. It's a very it's a very kinetic opening here. It's like skydiving, rollerblading.
Yeah, it's basically to tell you that these guys are super cool. Like,
You know what I liked about the rollerblading though? I mean, the skydiving was a cool opening, and it was that's the thing. It was a cool way to be like, hey, this isn't the show, right? Like we're going to show you something that you're not going to typically see. What I liked about the rollerblading is that it was always very limited on the show in terms of what we could see of Angel Grove for a variety of reasons, right? They had certain sets they were working with, and
it was like 7 different cities.
Exactly. And it's like when we were on location, a lot of times it was parks. They used parks a lot. And then of course so much of the action footage came from the Japanese show. So you have all of these, the docks and the industrial areas, and
Yeah.
we've talked
It's
about this. It's
Tokyo,
like, what
yeah.
the hell kind of city is Angel Girl? It's like it's every kind of city you can imagine. So
Yeah.
here, now they're filming in Australia, and as they're rollerblading through, it's like, oh, like you get to see more of where they are,
Mhm.
in this context. So I like that. I thought that was cool.
No, that was cool. And listen, dude, I love like extreme sports, like skateboarding, and everything. And like when I was a kid, man, rollerblading, which kind of died off. Like rollerblading is like not like a thing anymore. Like it's not like a sport that like you don't like see like in the X Games, or at least not that I'm aware of. So it's strange how something so culturally like big like rollerblading just kind of died off. But it was cool seeing them like doing their like tricks and.
Just going back to Fred and his dad for a second. So I agree with you. They throw in this bit at the end where Fred's like, well, I learned from you from our martial arts classes. And it's like, oh, okay. So, that was a piece of information. But, look, I appreciated the attempt to give us the, sort of the human point of view in all of this.
Let me ask you this as a dad, okay? How does it rub you now that like the dad is made like a total buffoon in this movie? Like it's like in the beginning when they're skydiving and they're all landing on the target, and Tommy comes with this snowboard like landing on the target. He's like, "See, Dad, he's awesome. He hit the target." And the dad's like, "It's like, well, I came close." He's like, "Yeah, the parking lot." I'm like, "Yeah, that's pretty close." Like I mean, it's only like 100 feet away. I mean, he jumped out of a friggin' plane. Like.
I know. The two things that stood out to me the most about the Fred of it all, specifically with his dad, one is that the actor's clear Australian accent, which was coming through at
dad?
points. The dad's, yeah.
Oh yeah.
But then my favorite Fred's dad moment is when he finds the ooze in the apartment, and like he smells it, right? And clearly like something's off. And what is this guy's first move? He shoves his finger like, all the way into this
picks
thing.
it up and starts like, might as well just start like eating it. He's just like smearing it all on his hands, and so it's just like, oh my god. And also, Ivan Ooze, when he's selling the ooze, is like the creepiest looking dude. Like, who would ever talk to this guy, let alone be like, yeah, I want all, like, and these kids are going nuts for this. Like, it's like, what? Like, it's like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get that. Actually, so that's another question. So yeah, how do you feel about the Ivan Ooze of it all? Because that's another big piece of this movie, that we get an original villain, yet we do also get Rita and Zed and Goldar and a new pig creature they created for the movie. Mordant, I believe is the name. But how do you feel about Ivan Ooze?
Yeah, well, I was wondering where the blue guy went. The blue guy from the show, the guy with like he's like a monkey or something. I liked him. He was cool.
Well, Squat and Babu, like they just disappeared.
Yeah. Which one's Babu? The blue guy or the
blue guy? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they're gone. So I wish the bad guy was Zed. Zed looks so much cooler. Like I feel like he's way scarier. Like Ivan Ooze is just kind of like, I don't know.
I hear you.
What did you think about him?
Like, even as a kid, I don't know that I ever really loved Ivan Ooze so much. He's definitely memorable, and I think you appreciate some of the one-liners more as an adult. When he's tearing apart the command center, and he's like, all the things I missed, like the Spanish Inquisition and all this stuff, and then he throws in the Brady Bunch reunion, and it's like, all right. Like, a couple of things made me chuckle, but I guess the way I look at it is, they were doing this movie. They weren't beholden to, although Zed was an American original, so this kind of undermines my argument, but they weren't beholden to having to fit within the Japanese footage that they had. I look at it and I'm like, I would not have been surprised or even held it against them if they just did Ooze. You know what I mean? Like, I was watching this and I said, I actually really appreciate that they gave us Rita and Zed. They tied it in like that. So yeah, ultimately I don't disagree with you. I love Zed. And Zed is visually and just in terms of character and his history with the Rangers, it's like, yeah, you probably could have just built this around Zed. But in a world where, again, I wouldn't have been surprised if they only used Ooze and just discarded the regular villains entirely. The way that they actually incorporated both, I appreciated. So it worked for me. It worked for me well enough. And of course, Goldar was true to form and fell in line following a new villain, just as he always does. Just like Zed showed up and he was quick to kick Rita out, and does the same thing here. So Yeah, I don't know. Not my favorite villain, but like I said, definitely memorable. And Paul Freeman, the act. I mean, he gave it everything. He was all in on this
Yeah,
Ivan Ooze
yeah. I mean,
performance.
I remembered him from when I was a kid. I remember that he was the bad guy in this movie, so made him memorable.
I think he also struck in terms of the performance and the design and the writing and everything. I think they struck a good balance where. I mean, again, as adults, it probably feels silly, but watching it and putting ourselves back in that mindset, like he felt like enough of a threat without being scary.
I thought as a kid, I mean, when he's dressed up like that clown, he's pretty scary. Like he looks like a serial killer. Like when he's like in human disguise, like very creepy looking. So like that was, I remember as a kid, that was one of the picture was in that book, that novelization. One of the pictures was that like clown, and I remember being like, ugh, this is crazy looking. Um, yeah, I mean, I just think Zed's so cool though. I will say Zed was the only Power Rangers villain that I had a toy of when I was a kid, because he was the only one that I thought was like cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't have an Ivan Ooze toy as a kid.
fair enough. No, Zed. I mean, Zed is a fantastic villain. So it's not that Zed get. I mean, so let's talk about the designs for the villains, especially Zed and the Rangers, because again, they're not like total redesigns, but they are. The movie does give us its own version of these looks. So, and that was one of the things they talked about in the retrospective again, as far as the Rangers costumes, where the director felt that it needed to be more tactical, more armor-like, as opposed to just the spandex of the TV show. So yeah, how did you feel about the Rangers redesign for this?
Dude, I loved them. I thought those costumes looked great, and I wish that they used them in the show. Like, I don't know why they didn't use them in the show after that. Like, did they just like trash the costumes? Like, I don't understand why they didn't keep them
Well, because on
for
the
the
show they
show.
were still the movie came out before season 3. So when season 3 of Mighty Morphin starts, it kicks off with the remember Masked. Do you remember Masked Rider?
I do. I had toys of that show. I loved that show.
So it starts with like a 2 or 3 part storyline that sets up the Masked Rider spinoff, and then it gets into the 4-part
Interesting.
Ninja Quest where they get their
Wait,
ninja powers
so
on the show.
was
What?
Masked Rider in Power Rangers?
Yeah, that's what introduced him, and then he got his own
Oh
show.
wow. Okay.
But as we're moving our way through season 3 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they're still weaving it in with, footage from the Japanese series. And I know a lot of the fight footage now they're creating on their own, right, of the stunt people in the Power Rangers costumes, but they're still pulling in footage from the Japanese show. So I think it was just this level of consistency they
Oh,
had to maintain.
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
But I agree. I
So
thought it was a really cool look. It definitely made sense that's the kind of
yeah,
armor they would have.
I thought it was very cool, and they had like cool upgrades. Kimberly had like a Castlevania whip that she and the Yellow Ranger had like lights on her head, and the Red Ranger's the only thing he does in the whole movie is his helmet morphs into like a Cyclops looking visor, and then he's got like Predator vision where he sees like heat, like, and that's like the only thing he does in the entire movie. He's got like heat vision for like a minute.
I sent you, and I mentioned earlier, I sent you the photo of that from that stunt footage that they had filmed without the visors. So
Oh
yeah,
my
what was your
god.
take on that?
I mean, I get why the director wanted to see their faces, like I get it, but it like fundamentally changes like the aesthetic of the characters, and it's like, it looks like it's missing something. It looks like they didn't like it's like what they shot before they put the CGI in or something. Like it doesn't look like right. So I'm glad they didn't. So for your listeners, what they essentially did was they were wearing their helmets, but where the black visor was and then where the mouthpiece was, they took out, so you could see like basically their faces, but they still had that like band over their nose and stuff, so, like where like that separates the visor from the mouthpiece. So like it's very weird looking.
Yeah, I appreciate that they tried it, right? And I agree with you. Like, I understand why, but I think they struck a good balance here, where we did get so many unmorphed fights in the film. So that's where you got to see them, and then when they're
Yeah,
fully morphed, yes, you do lose that, but then that allows your stunt team to really cut loose, and you get to see them do things that the
yeah.
actors wouldn't be able to do. So I think it's a fair trade off.
Well, you know what? Now that you mentioned that, in the new Power Rangers movie that came out, didn't they have like scenes where like the face part like retracted, so you did see their face, like
Yeah.
the 2017, 2018, whenever that movie came out?
Hmm.
Like they like when they were in their suits, I think there was a like the face part like goes like back, and like you'd see like their faces while they're in their costumes. So maybe that's something they got from this movie.
Maybe, and again, with the benefit of technology and being able to like that, that definitely works. I think in this realm where it's either, what are their three options? What we
Yeah,
saw from that test footage where the visors come out and that just looks really goofy versus,
yeah,
them being fully helmeted versus taking the entire thing off.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
tough. It is kind of a tough thing there. But no, I agree. I dug the look a lot. I mean, that was definitely one of those things that you're watching it and it just feels different.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I liked these costumes more than the 2017 Power Rangers costumes for
Fair.
what it's worth. Like I think these looked way better. Like flat out, I think these looked much better than the ones from the modern one. So
No, fair. And I know I mentioned it before, but really, again, the command center itself gets a new set, so that looks different. Uh, but when Ooze tears apart the fortress and then the Rangers, oh, by the way, I love how the command center is destroyed, right? Their power source is wrecked, apparently. Yet the Rangers are able to remain morphed long enough to finish their fight with Ooze's creatures. And as soon as the fight is over, then everything fades away. But anyway, uh, but when they go back to the command, I keep wanting to say fortress. That's a Superman fan of me. But when they go back to the command center, and Zordon is just lying there. I mean, what do you remember about that from watching that as a kid?
I remember being shocked that he was like a guy in a tube. I thought he was just like a floating head. Like I didn't think he was like actually like a person inside the tube. And then they give this they say he's out of his time warp with no explanation as to what that is or like why he's in this tube. Like very strange.
Going back to I think the first episode of the Power Rangers TV show, I believe what I think what it's either Alpha or Zordon, but one of them says that Zordon is an interdimensional being trapped in a time warp.
Oh, okay, okay.
Watching it, and I think we're reasonable to conclude this based on what we see on the show for all those years, is like you never get the sense that yes, he's like you said, a guy in a tube there.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I guess there's nothing to directly contradict that either. So it's like you
yeah.
watch this but this is one of those things, even long before I started thinking about it for this podcast, right? Like I've always had that image of him lying there in that gray turtleneck,
Dress,
just,
the gray turtleneck dress. Yeah.
yeah, just lying like as a kid. I mean, that was like, I actually wonder
He
if
he looks like Darth Vader kind of. Like he's
kind
like
of,
chalky white and everything. Yeah, it's very weird.
but I wonder if the director, if Saban, if the actors, if they knew, and maybe they've talked about this, I don't know, but if they knew just kind of how shocking that would be to the kids who watch the show. I mean, and not even in a traumatic way, but like that made an impression. Like I just remember being like, oh my god, like
Yeah.
there's a guy in there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what's really funny, dude, and we're eventually going to do an episode on the Japanese Power Rangers because we're talking about it so much, but there is no Zordon in the Japanese show. Like, there's like this wizard character who like kind of like resurrects them, the characters, but he functions more like an Alfred to like them than like Zordon giving them commands. He's not. He's like kind of like this like old man who kind of like like helps them out and hobbles around, but he's not like their leader. Like the function of Zordon in the Japanese show is the Red Ranger. Like he's like the guy who like tells them where to go and what to do. So like it's such a strange thing that they added for the American show. Like just the concept of this giant floating head. Like that's such a strange like I had always assumed that was something from the Japanese show, but it's not. It's a completely like whole like savant thing. So I'm like it's very strange. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I think this came up in IMDb trivia. I can't remember where I read this, but I think the original screenplay, the flow of it was that the Rangers get their new powers on Thedos, and then they go back to the command center, and then they go into battle with Ooze. And the final version obviously flipped that.
Mhm.
And I think it was a smart choice because it makes sense that the situation is so urgent, right? They have to go right into battle, and then they get to the command center and it's too late. But Tommy learned that with this power, anything is possible. and they stand around, and it's one of these things. It doesn't make
They,
any
they,
sense, but
and they play the destruction of the command center in reverse,
yep.
and it gets rebuilt. Yeah, it's like
But it's one of those things, right? Look, the show always, and the movie, right? It walks this weird balance between science fiction and mysticism, right? In terms of, and even in the show, it's like, they derive like the power comes from ancient dinosaurs, but like, what does that mean? And then yet they're robots. It's always a little hard to reconcile exactly how all of this works. And then there's the morphing grid business and everything. So there's always it's always a little bit nebulous, but I think that gives them some room to play. And so I think when you get to that final scene, and I think it works much better after the final battle, where, it just taps into the core theme of the show of just believing in each other and working together. And, it's enough to bring Zordon back. I don't know. I
it's good. It's good. It's good. It's yeah. I'm right there with you, man. It's good. Yeah, oh man, now I forgot what I was gonna say. I swear it was profound, but now I can't remember now.
Well,
It'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Well, throw it in whenever it comes. But let me, while we're talking about this power that they get and the whole idea of the redesigns and everything, not that this is a redesign, but a new addition is this ninjetti garb that they get on Thedos.
So dope.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
I loved it as a kid. I wanted them to only wear the ninja suits. Like I remember when they had them in the TV show, and they would turn into the ninjas and then into the Power Rangers. Like, no, just stay as the ninjas. You look so cool as the ninjas. Yeah, especially with the TV costumes, like the ninjas looked way cooler.
It was cool. One thing that, and we'll talk about this more next time when we talk about the Ninja Quest arc, but one thing that I see is that in the TV show, when they have their ninja costumes on, their eye, everything is covered. Yet in the show, in the movie, even when the hoods come up, you still see a significant portion of their face. So that was one change from the movie to the show.
Wait, so in the TV show they don't have you don't see their eyes?
No.
What is it? Like what?
It's over like a mask and then a hood. I don't know. We'll unpack that more when I rewatch those. But yeah, so it is slightly different. And even here in the movie, you get a couple phases of it, right? So they're in the temple with Dulcia, and they get the ninja costumes and their animal spirits and all of that. And then they have their initial fight against the dinosaur skeletons. And then when they come up to the monolith and their final test, they're against the ropes and they need to power up. So they summon the ninjetti power, and then their hoods come up and then they have more power. However this works. But, you even get a couple of phases to it there. Yeah.
I mean, as a kid in the 90s, dude, there's nothing cooler than ninjas. Like, I loved it so, like, I loved ninjas like Mortal Kombat, like Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Like, I just thought they looked so friggin' cool. And, like, to see the Power Rangers as ninjas, I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. I guess it was always interesting to me adding in this intermediate step, right? Because we were so used to watching the show and they fight as civilians, and then when the situation is too dire, then they morph. But so now there's and I'll have to rewatch these episodes because I don't remember. I don't know if they maybe we didn't get as many civilian fights. Maybe they went to the ninja stuff quicker. I don't remember. But it's like now we have yet another phase here. So I don't know, but it was cool. I mean, I agree. I definitely was a ninja for Halloween as a kid. Like it was a thing, and it was fun.
Me too. Yeah, I wonder if ninjas are still culturally relevant, like the younger generation. Like I don't know, because I feel like in the 90s it was huge. Like every show had like a ninja character, like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and like again Mortal Kombat. Like every video game had ninja characters. So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, my son's 3.5. As he gets older and he starts getting more into that, I'll let you know. I don't know. Like, I just don't know if that's as much of a thing. Oh, and so as far as the Dulcia of it all, so we were texting about this as well. Now I was aware of this. I've been learning more about it, but yeah, Mariska Hargitay was the original Dulcia and even did a bit of filming before she was replaced with, the actress who took over the role. But there are a couple of photos of her, and I even found on YouTube, I'll have to send it to you, some like very rare, very grainy behind the scenes footage where she's training with David Yost and like they're practicing the like hand-to-hand combat. Because that was the thing. So there was this whole sequence apparently that she had filmed where it was Dulcia training the Rangers. It wasn't just, here are your animal spirits, good luck.
Yeah.
But there was
She
an
kind of in the movie was like just thrown on for like no reason. Like she just was there, and then she turned into an owl, and that was it.
yes. So in the
It's
I
very
guess
weird.
the earlier intention was that there was more of a sequence of her training them, and I think that's what Mariska Hargitay filmed. And then they talked about this on the Blu-ray where I guess that footage wasn't working, and so they talked to the studio about reinserting more of the action pieces that they had planned that had gotten cut, and in the midst of all of this, they decided to switch actresses. I don't know. There's a lot of back and forth on that
Why
front.
did they replace her? Did they say why?
So Mariska Hargitay on Seth Meyers a couple of years ago, basically she framed it as they were kind of keeping her in a holding pattern for a while. She was in Australia and Christmas was approaching. And she was like, well, guys, I have to go home for Christmas. And after the Christmas break, she called them up and she was like, hey, I'm ready to come back. And they were like, no, you're good. So, I mean, that's kind of her version of it. The way that it was framed in terms of what Spicer was talking about on that featurette, it was more that I think the actress who ended up playing Dulcia was Spicer's original choice, but she had some health issues and the studio wanted Hargitay. And then I guess when they saw that initial footage, and, you know, I think Spicer said in that interview, like it wasn't Hargitay's fault, but that footage just wasn't really working. That first footage that they were filming of Dulcia training them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe all of these things together, between the Christmas break, between the footage not being what they wanted it, between wanting that original actress anyway and her becoming available now, like all of it just kind of fed into replacing her. But I mean, again, it's you know, she ends up, you know, being on the longest running television show in history. So it's like this weird footnote in her filmography that it's like, yeah, she was this warrior guide on the Power Rangers movie and got fired from it. But
that's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what do you think of the Rangers themselves, the actors? Because, like, I think that, like, they all are really good. Like, Jason David Frank and Amy Jo Johnson and David Yost and who are the other ones? The other one's I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah,
Johnny Young Bosch. I know Johnny Young Bosch because he does a ton of anime voices, but the other two I can't remember their names.
Yep, Steve Cardenas, Karen Ashley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, like, so that's the thing, man. I mean, I thought they did a great job, and I thought that I was happy that they had this opportunity.
Yeah.
I saw some footage from the red carpet premiere of the movie on YouTube. Again, very old, grainy footage, but they're there in their costumes without the helmets, but they're there in the Power Rangers costume. And part of me is like, man, you had to make them wear the costume. It's like, can't they just dress up and relax? But anyway, you know, we've heard so much over the years about how, you know, kind of what a demanding schedule it was for them filming the show. And they would do, you know, multiple episodes in a week, you know, just filming the American side of the footage that then would be mixed with the Japanese stuff. You know, we know that the pay wasn't great and all of that. So I like that they had this moment, right, to kind of bask in their stardom as the Rangers and to like be in a full on movie and have a red carpet premiere and all that stuff. So
yeah,
I'm happy for them on that sense. And I thought they did a great job in the film.
No, yeah, I'm shocked that they didn't like all of the. I know Amy Jo Johnson did a lot after. Like I know she was in a couple Disney movies when I was a kid growing up, and like I know she's on a TV show now where she's like a cop. But like I'm surprised the other ones didn't have like. I mean, Johnny Young Bosch, obviously, we said he's a huge voiceover actor. Like he's the voice of Ichigo from Bleach and Vash from Trigun. Like every anime you've ever seen, he's the voice in. But like all the other ones, like Jason David Frank and like David Yost, like they're good actors. Like I don't know why they didn't like have more. You know, it's like were they that typecast from Power Rangers, or did they just like not want to do it anymore? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say. I know Steve Cardenas, I think he has a Brazilian jiu-jitsu studio. And so, you know, he's a martial artist, and it might have just been a case of, you know, he wanted to do other stuff. I don't know. But they talked about how...
He was good, too. He was good, too. I didn't mean to, like, omit him when I was naming the names. Like, and Karen Ashley, they were all really good in this show, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they talked about how they were so used to filming so much so fast for the TV show that they were so kind of taken aback at how on the movie they would film, you know, a page a day. And it was like, you know, just so much waiting around, and they took so much time and they did so many takes. And again, I do think that I think I don't want to make like, oh, the material was vastly better than the TV show. Like we've been talking about it. I don't think they're worlds apart, but I think they had a little bit more to, But I think they had a little more to work with, and I think they had more time, and I think, you know, they had a director who had a certain vision for this, and I think it all came together nicely. And one of the things Spicer talked about, and I mentioned this, especially you as an artist with your visual eye, he talked about how hard it was composing shots where you have all 6 of them in the shot and doing it in a way where it's not just the same setup every time and kind of having them in different and dynamic poses and things like that. To whatever extent that was registering with you, how did you think that played on screen?
I mean, and from our first episode, we talked about this in the Japanese footage. They did this really well, where they would, like, in the fight scenes, they would do shots where, like, 2 of them are fighting here in the foreground. Then there's, like, another building in the background, mid-ground, that the 2 more fighting. And then in the further background, there's more. Like, they would do that a lot on the Japanese footage. So, like, I do understand, like, yeah. I mean, just drawing team books for comics is, like, so difficult all the time to draw all the characters, like, in the frame all the time. So I can definitely understand why he would have, where we're, like, for, like, a team thing like that, where you, especially something like Power Rangers, where, like, in theory, they are kind of all equal. Like, it's not like, you know how some superhero teams, like the Justice League, right? Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman are always going to be in the front and everyone else is in the back, you know? Whereas, like, Power Rangers, it's like they are kind of like an equal unit straight up. Like, it's like, in theory, with the exception of whoever the leader is, but even that's sort of nebulous. Like, it's not like, you know, it's very much like they're kind of like supposed to be like straight, like, equals as Rangers, you know?
Yeah. 3 things that I'll just mention quickly, I guess kind of all Tommy related. One is that I am surprised that the movie didn't delve more into the romance with Kimberly, because it feels like if there were an opportunity, not that I would expect the relationship to be the driving force in the film, but it's like if there were an opportunity to be able to do more than we typically see on the show, like, I feel like it would be here, and you don't get that.
I mean, he put his arm around her at the end when they were watching the fireworks, man.
I know.
Sweetheart moment. Okay, wait. Let me ask you this: as someone who's watching the show, is there actually any romance between them on the show at all, or is that just something that we all concocted in our heads, like, as kids?
It's there, but it's very minimal, and it's exceedingly chaste. There is a kiss. I don't know if there are more, but there's at least one kiss, and, you know, he asks her to a dance, and after he becomes the White Ranger, like, they have a date in the park, like, where they have a picnic. Again, like, it's all very, very, very surface level.
But it's there, though. Okay, yeah.
It's there, but I'll as I watch more of the season 3 episodes before Kimberly leaves, I'll try to pay more attention to this. But it's like, I don't think, audience, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you ever really get a sense that they're full on in a relationship. Like, it's all very, like, they're dating, but it's like, again, very, very surface level.
So it's not one of the greatest romances of the 20th century, as I grew up believing.
I don't know. I feel like even on the show, it was probably something more in retrospect, right? Because she sends him, after Kimberly leaves the show, Tommy gets that Dear John letter from her where she breaks up with him. So I feel like in retrospect, they made it like it was a bigger thing than it was.
So this is, like, how bad my memory is of this. I do not remember her leaving the show and there ever being a second Pink Ranger. Like, I remember when our friend Chris Wilcox, who does Undiscovered Realm, the last convention of his that I was at, the second Pink Ranger was there, and I had, like, no memory of this person as a kid. Like, I was like, there was a second Pink Ranger, and I was like, wait, what? And, like, I Googled it, and I was like, this must have been after, but, like, it could have been because she was in the pterodactyl costume. So I was like, this had to be before Zeo. Like, I just totally, like, memory blanked that whole thing, and I was like, wow, I did not even realize that was a thing.
So we have an episode coming up on the transition between Pink Rangers, so that's coming, but. Yeah, it's very deep into the final season of Mighty Morphin. It's shortly before Zeo, but yeah, there's this whole arc. Yeah.
Okay.
So Catherine Sutherland, who plays Kat, she comes in towards the end of Mighty Morphin. She's there through all of Zeo, and she's there until midway through Turbo when they replaced Tommy, Kat, Adam, and Tanya, who had replaced Aisha. So she's there, you know, until we have, like, the full changing of the guard.
Wait, so Tommy leaves in Turbo?
Yeah.
That's when he's done? Okay. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah. But so as far as the movie, I guess the other things with Tommy, this is so minor, but it made me laugh when they're fighting in the jungle and Tommy's like, ninjetti corkscrew kick. And he does that spinning kick. I just love that he gave a name to it. And it's like, bro, you've had these powers for like 2 seconds. But he's already got the name.
I mean, I appreciated that. That was a very anime thing. Like I feel like in anime they do that a lot, where they like in Dragon Ball Z, like Vegeta's like Gallic gun, and he like does this like so, and that just that kind of like pulled at my my heartstrings. I was like, yeah, call the name out of your attack as you do it.
Yeah, I know. No, it works. No, it works. And then again, another small thing, but I loved when they first encountered Dulcia and she's like, you know, this place is littered with the bones of those who tried. And he's like, well, we're different. We're the Power Rangers. And she just lays him out in a second. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So,
I do see this is where like the it being the execution of being very very service level is when she's like they're like Zordon sent us here and she's like, you know Zordon, Ivan Ooze is back. Like she like knows all these people, and like Ivan Ooze knows who Dulcia is, and like apparently she's the only person on this planet. Like it's so like
and she can't go into the jungle or she'll age. I don't know. Which was funny to me because it's like, I
she's
could help.
scantily clad.
She's like, I could help you, but I got to stay young and hot. So you guys are on your own.
Yeah.
Which, look, so that's one of those things as far as how scantily clad she is. You know, again, as a kid, I'm not registering this, but as an adult, I'm watching it and it's like, okay, so this was for the dads who were taking their kids
Yeah,
to see the movie. Because that
definitely.
was
Yeah.
very risque outfit for a kid's movie.
It was, man. It was very scantily clad. Like I feel like they would never have a costume like that now if they did this movie. You know, like it's like
Right? No, I agree. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. And I mean, I don't mind, but at the same time, I did have that same thought where I'm like, was this appropriate for like for a kids movie?
They definitely. I mean, but I think it was that time, like Mortal Kombat. Because like, thinking about, I feel like there was a big influence from Mortal Kombat on this movie, like the ninjas and everything, and like the girl ninjas in Mortal Kombat kind of dressed like Dulcia. So I feel like that was probably where the inspiration came from for this. Would be my
Is
guess. Who knows?
is there again just this idea of the quest and this Wizard of Oz like journey that they go on? Is there anything in particular that you wish you had seen? Some other test that they would have needed to pass, like anything that comes to mind? And I know I'm putting you on the spot. No worries if not. But I'm
Yeah,
just
I
curious.
mean, maybe like a Zord thing would have been cool. Like mastering their Zords or something. Like have they have to fight their own Zords or something. That might have been cool
That felt
instead of
very
just random.
like that felt very tacked on. Where we're just like, oh, and we have new Zords, by the way. It's like, okay. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. That's the thing that I thought was also odd was that when they get their powers awakened, I'm surprised they didn't get different costumes. I was actually surprised about that because like that would have been an opportunity to sell more toys. But then again, they kind of cheaped out on the toys anyway and just repainted the old ones, so it wasn't like you know.
that's a good, and I guess I wonder because I say to myself, they didn't have to worry that, oh, if we change the design of the costumes, then it's not going to line up with the show, right? This was going to be its own thing anyway. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, this could have been the thing where these costumes were so difficult or expensive to make. They had to make the quote unquote regular costumes for the pre ninja stuff. And
yeah.
then, yes, it's like they could have redesigned them for after they get their new power source, but maybe it was just like, look, we made these costumes. Like, that's
That's
it.
probably it because I just feel like it's so weird where it's like you're the Falcon, Tommy, but like all your stuff says you're still a tiger, you know? Like it's just so weird. Like or like Billy, like you got the wolf, which is like a sweet. That's probably his coolest Zord he's ever had, but he's got like still the Triceratops. Like everything is Triceratops, so it's like very very strange that they did it that way.
You know, I guess I would have liked if there was something, again, character based, some sort of personal obstacle that they had to overcome. But again, it's like, that was not what this was built for. And I understand that. And it
No,
works for
yeah,
what
it
it is.
definitely wasn't. Yeah. And like as a kid, dude, I didn't question the new Zords versus their old costumes at all. Like it wasn't like anything I thought of at all. Like I was not like, oh, the White Ranger has got a falcon now. Like I didn't care that his suit looked like a tiger, you know? Like
Going back to this whole idea of just what this movie was, sort of an extension of the show, but its own thing, right? That exists in its own little pocket. I was, as a fellow Superman and Smallville fan, I was thinking this would have been like during the run of Smallville, we had Superman Returns, right? Which was its own thing, but it would have been as if in between seasons 5 and 6 of Smallville, Superman Returns had featured Tom Welling and the Smallville cast, like, and you saw him become Superman and all this stuff, and then season 6 starts and he's like still hanging out on the farm, and
yeah.
it would like that's what it
Yeah.
would have been like. So it's this was
That's
just,
true.
again, I just
Yeah.
keep coming back to this idea of how, and again, I don't say weird in a bad way. it's just so interesting to me that this was the path
But
that they chose.
the thing about Power Rangers, though, and again, I think why I think it was so successful is that there really wasn't continuity in the show. I mean, there was, but it was so loose. Like it was like you didn't have to watch. Like you could jump in with episode like 12 and like not have watched anything before it and be totally caught up. And like I feel like that's why the movie worked as well as it did, because it wasn't like it didn't contradict to the TV show. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like you could, like what I think I did as a kid was just kind of like, oh, this was an adventure they went on, and then they went back to having their old Zords and they got new ninja stuff. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like it wasn't like a through line, you know? Like I don't know if I'm explaining that properly.
No, I get it. No, you are right. I think where there's continuity is obviously when we have changing of Rangers or changing of Zords, but even then
Hmm.
it's not, it was not a heavily serialized show, except in instances where we had a multi-part,
Yeah,
multi-episode story. But yes, generally speaking, you had your typical
those
formula.
those those felt like events though when they did that, like the Green Ranger event. Like that felt like a thing that like at least in my school that all the kids were like, gotta get home to watch Power Rangers, see what happens, and like talk about like the next day at school, you know? Because it aired like every day. That's the other thing is that it wasn't once a week. It was literally every day at 3:30 for me. Like crazy.
And well, speaking of the show, so the production dragged so long in Australia that they had the actors also work on episodes of the TV show. And we talked about this in a couple of
Really?
prior episodes. Yeah, the wedding three-parter where Rita and Zed get married, and the return of the Green Ranger where we have the duplicate of Tommy who becomes the evil Green Ranger and fights the White Ranger. Those 6 episodes were all made while they were in Australia. And we talked about this. It is kind of glaring because you're watching it and clearly they only had the actual actors for limited time. So in those both of those three-parters, like they're morphed for so long, like you for so much longer than you typically would see them. But the thing that I wonder is like, I wonder what that was like for them, for the actors, right? To be in Australia or the other side of the world, working on this big budget motion picture, right? Doing scenes where they're spending an entire day on one page. And
Hmm.
then like being, okay, now you're going to do some episodes of the show. And like, they're back in that mode. I mean, I don't know. I wonder what that was like.
Dude, it had to be whiplash like crazy. And like for them, like as an adult now, like in the mindset, like as a kid, I thought there'd be nothing cooler than being a Power Ranger, right? But now as an adult, it's like they probably had no idea what they were getting into. They definitely probably did not think the rest of their lives were going to be defined by this show, this like kid show that they were making, you know? Like, and like it was probably one of those things that went by so quick too that like it's probably weird for like Jason David Frank that like it was this thing that I did for like 2 years in my 20s that like that's like what everyone knows me for, you know?
I know. I think that, that's always one of those tough things. What I mean, whatever it is, right? Whether it's the actors on Power
Yeah.
Rangers or a band that they're a one hit wonder or something like that. And I don't know. On the one hand, yes, I'm sure it's tough to be sort of primarily known for just one thing when you want to do other things. But then at the
Yeah.
same time, there are plenty of people who
Never yet have.
strive. Yeah, who like
Yeah.
strive for that, and like they're not known for anything. So it's like, hey,
Yeah.
even if there's one thing that people know you from, it's like, hey, that's more than a lot
Yeah.
of
No,
people
no.
get.
When I was saying that, I didn't mean it as like a bad thing, as being like they'd be mad about it. I meant it more like as like an odd, like not that like not that you'd resent it, right? Not I like I, at least I hope they didn't resent it, but like more in just the oddness of it, of being like think about like when you were say 22 to 24, like the rest of your life being defined by like the job you did when you were 22 to 24. Like not saying that's like like bad, but like just like weird, you know? Like it's like, huh, you know?
No, I know. I totally get what you're
Be
saying
very
for sure.
strange.
Absolutely. I also have to give this movie credit for, and I had forgotten this. So I watched this. My wife took our son to her mom's for a long weekend, and they were on their way back. And I was like, okay, I think I have just enough time to watch this before they get home. And I like just made it, but I was like a little rushed. And as the Rangers are at the fireworks display and Van Halen's playing, like we said, and the credits start to roll, I was like, okay, like I'm going to turn this off. And I'm glad I waited a few seconds because we got that mid-credit scene where Zed and Rita show back up at the Moonbase Palace. So it's like good on this movie. Like, this was a very early instance of a mid-credit scene. It's like,
Yeah.
now, man, we're conditioned for that now with all these Marvel movies. But that was, I don't know, that was pretty cool that they did that.
That was cool. Yeah, I totally forgot about that, and it was like a fun little gag to have at the end too. No, it was good. It was very good. I I will say at the end when they're at that like restaurant when the fireworks are playing, did you notice they were eating this like insane spread of crab's legs? It was like, did you notice that? It was like buckets of crab's legs everywhere, and I'm like, interesting, interesting choice. Like,
Well, that was Ernie's. That was Ernie's. He had more scenes, I
was
think,
it?
that got cut. Yeah, but that there was a sign. I did notice the sign that said Ernie's, but
That was
yeah.
the juice bar.
Yeah.
That was the same juice bar that has like the workout equipment and the karate matches and like the science fairs. Like,
It was at least Ernie's. I don't know if in the movie, and I'd have to double check, audience, I'm sure you know. It might have said like Ernie's, like maybe it was Ernie's Crab Shack or Ernie's Sea, but it was Ernie's. So I don't know if it was
okay.
I don't know if it was literally meant to be like, hey, if you go inside, you're going to see gym mats and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it was Ernie's. But yeah, no, that was cool. And you know, with the kid, you know, he has this whole conversation with them where it's like, you know, they're like, oh, maybe you could be the next Power Ranger. Like anything is possible. And when we get to Turbo, and
That is so stupid.
I had stopped watching at that point, but you did have that kid in Turbo. And I think fans sort of always were kind of like, hey,
Is it
why?
the same kid?
No, it's not. But it's like, why not bring him back? I mean, I'm sure there were reasons why, but it's like you set something up here and then you never see Fred again.
Is it the same character?
No, different
Like, is it
character.
the same character?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, dude, that was so stupid at the end when they're like, "Oh, here you're like, why would he be another Power Ranger? Why? What did he do that like is Power Ranger worthy?" I was like so like incensed by that. I was like, this is stupid pandering right here. Like this.
Well, no, listen, I'll speak up for Fred because he rallied all the other kids and they drove the monorail and they you know, he was spraying the hose against the adults while they were walking to their deaths under the thrall of Ooze. Nah, I'll give him that. I'll give him that. He displayed some. We get very little, you know, and then
Stretch.
very little Bulk and Skull in this. You know, we see them skydiving, and then they pop up, you know, later on, you know, when they work with the kids. But I don't mind it per se, but I was kind of surprised. Relatively minimal Bulk and Skull.
Yeah, I mean the Bulk and Skull. I never really liked the Bulk and Skull stuff. It's like very like it's very like their music. They're doing their music and stuff. I'm just like, meh. And like they seem to be way bigger friends with the Power Rangers in this. Like they're skydiving with them. Like I'm like, why? Like, yeah, it's very very odd because I always thought they were like bullies that the Power Rangers didn't like. But
That there's definitely that shift. I
yeah,
think the first season of the show they are far more those bullies, and then as they get into the second and third season and beyond, they're more like lovable goofs. I think the Rangers find them more of a, you know, an amusing nuisance rather than antagonists. So I think so I don't think that was
okay,
totally out of line, but
yeah,
Jason Narvi, who played Skull, talked about how they had so much downtime on that movie, the two of them, Bulk and
yeah.
Skull, and he was like, I bought a car and like we were just traveling around Australia, we were going to the bars, like we were showing up on set when the Rangers were working and we were teasing them, and they thought it was amusing at first, but then as the shoot dragged on, they were getting annoyed. So I think those two guys had a lot of fun making that movie.
Did they get along with the Rangers in real life? Were they?
It seems that
They're all
way.
friendly.
It
Yeah,
seems that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, they had very little to do in this movie, so it was probably like a vacation, like a paid vacation for them to just hang out and like, you know.
I know. Is there
I wonder
anything
what those
else?
guys are doing now.
Yeah, I did look them up. I don't know offhand. They've been doing some stuff. I'm not positive, but they, you know, they have returned to the franchise periodically, and Paul Schreier, who played Bulk, he did a whole season of the show or two. Like
Oh
he came
wow.
back like years and years later. So
Yeah. No, I mean they were good actors. Like I mean the shtick of the characters was something that I was as a kid like I didn't really like I didn't want comedy in my superheroes. Like I wanted to just be this is earnest and serious. Like I don't want any funny stuff. Like but like they were very good at what they did, you know. So
I hear you. Is there
yeah.
anything else we didn't talk about with respect to this movie that you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean I do want to I want to ask in this age of reboots, right? how cool would it be to get a new Power Rangers like Netflix reboot with all the same actors? I mean, it'd be very sad now because of R.I.P. Jason David Frank. He's no longer with us, which, thoughts and prayers go out to his family. But yeah, with the ones who are remaining, like it'd be cool to like, see, you know, like Johnny Young Bosch and David Yost and
Well, they're doing
Amy
the
Jo
once
Johnson,
they're doing the Once and
Zach.
Always special on Netflix. There's going to be so David Yost produced this. It's a scripted reunion special on Netflix where they're back. The original. So Walter Jones, Zach,
Yeah.
David Yost, Billy, and Johnny Young Bosch, Steve Cardenas, Catherine Sutherland, I think Karen Ashley. Like basically that original, like the first two iterations of Mighty Morphin.
What-
Like they're
Jason?
no
Is Jason
Austin St. John and no Amy Jo Johnson. I think it came
Okay.
down to money, I think. But yeah, I mean, a lot of them are coming back. It's called Once and Always. It'll be on Netflix in April. We'll be doing an episode about it right after on the
Cool.
podcast. But yeah, so you got your wish. I mean, the idea of these guys for the 30-year anniversary, I'm very excited for it.
Is it gonna be like a show or is it
Yeah.
them like talking about it?
No, it's a special. It's just one episode. But yeah,
But it's like them. But it's like them as the characters. It's not like the
Yes.
Harry Potter reunion thing.
No,
right?
no,
Okay. Oh,
it's them as the
interesting.
characters. Yeah.
Interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. That is very cool. So okay, I'll be excited to see that.
Yeah. No, for sure. I do wonder, and I guess as much as this was such a big thing for us, I suspect maybe the movie didn't do well enough to warrant a sequel. Because I mean, in fairness, it's like, yes, there was the Turbo movie, but that was a different animal.
How many years? Because in my head, I remember seeing the posters for that when I was a kid in the theaters, and it felt like when I was a kid being like Power Rangers. Still, they're making this crap like, but it had to have been a very short amount of time. It had to have only been like 2 or 3 years. Like, do you know the time gap?
I think it was just a couple of years because after the Mighty Morphin movie, we had the final season of Mighty Morphin on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had the Zeo season. And then there was the Turbo movie before the Turbo season. So it was just a couple of years.
Oh yeah. See, it's so weird how time, like, when you're a kid, the difference between first grade to third grade is like a world of difference in perception, right? Because at that point, I remember seeing them being thinking like, they're still making Power Rangers? What? Like, yeah.
I know. But I guess like a true sequel to this movie, not what the Turbo movie was. It would have been interesting to see. But I'm just glad we have this. I don't know. I think even without this movie, the show still is something that we would be thinking and talking about because of the role that it played in our childhoods. But the movie was huge, and the movie took it to another level. And I very much value its place in the franchise and its history. And like I said, it was really, really fun to go back and revisit, and very fun to talk about with you. So I thank you very much for coming along, for teleporting in and coming along.
Hell yeah, man. Thanks for having me, man. This was so much fun. And yeah, I mean, it was a great little trip down memory lane, checking it out and thinking about the toys and everything. So
absolutely. So where do you want to direct people to follow you and or check out your DEATHSHROUD comic book project?
Oh yeah. You can follow me at V Ken Marion on Instagram and at VK Marion on Twitter, and check out DEATHSHROUD Giant Size issue number 1 on Indiegogo. It's in demand right now, so you can pick up your copy for the first issue. Issue number 2 is going to be launching. The campaign for that's going to be launching on April 3rd. So yeah, we're rocking and rolling with it. So catch up on this the series now. It's an action-packed, very, very 90s-esque throwback kind of like vibe with a very, gritty anti-hero kind of comic. So if you grew up like in Power Rangers and like this was like when you were a childhood, like in this era, you'll very much respond to like this type of comic book because it's very much in the vein of like early Image stuff. So like Spawn and like, Darkness and stuff like that. So go check that out. And I'm the artist on it, and we've been working super hard. So yeah, I hope everyone can check it out and see if they like it.
Very cool. Well, I hope everyone will. Ken, thank you again. It's always a blast talking with you. Audience, thank you for joining us. Make sure you come back in 2 weeks. Like I said, we'll be talking about Ninja Quest. And as always, remember, once a Ranger fan, always a Ranger fan. This show is part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review today. Sign up at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato for additional content. Thank you all.